Morning. All right, you're not awake yet. Good morning. Well, welcome to Compass. Our mission is navigating people to God. My name's Nate. I'm the campus pastor here at Compass North Fort Worth, and we're so glad you're here. So glad that you're worshiping with us today. And if you're a guest of ours, an extra special welcome to you this morning. We'd love to meet you, and we have a gift that we'd like to give you. No strings attached. You can just say, "Hey, give me my gift" as you leave here today. All right. We want to connect with you, though. We would love to connect with you in that way. And so, in our next steps area, which is just at the back of the room here, our team will be there to meet you. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have. You know, as we begin today, I just thought I would start off for those of you who are here today who are mourning the loss of TCU. I just have to say, go Bucks, all right? And if you need prayer after the service, I'm more than happy to pray with you about that. Anyway, so I'll leave that at that. I'm excited about the game last night. It was worth staying up so that I could come here and be in a good mood this morning. But we're glad that you're here. You know, as Marcus said, next Saturday night, we have the movie night on the lawn. I want to encourage you to invite someone to that. We're going to have free food, hot dogs, popcorn, candy, and it's going to be a great night together. It's a great opportunity to invite a neighbor, a friend, or someone that maybe has never stepped foot in the doors of the church here. Just an opportunity to say, hey, this is my church is just doing this movie night on the lawn. I'd love for you to come to that. There's no strings attached. Just kind of give that invitation this week. And you'll be able to share those invitations on social media this week. Those will be blasted out, and we want you to share those with somebody, tag them in that, and just let us know you're coming too, so we make sure we have enough food for that. Well, you know, when I was a kid, every spring break, my family would drive from Ohio to Florida, where my grandparents had a condo. Well, one year in particular, we were driving to Florida, and we decided to stop the night in Savannah, Georgia. And the reason that we stopped there, I'm not really sure why, but my dad, he got a hotel room there, and we got up to the desk and he said, "Hey, could you tell me where a Hardee's is at? Because I'm craving some Hardee's fried chicken." Now, I know what some of you are thinking, Hardee's fried chicken, seriously? Like, what about the Colonel Sanders, right? I don't know. My dad loved Hardee's fried chicken for some reason. So we got the address to this place, and then we drove down the street where we were told it was supposed to be, and somewhere along the way, my dad made a wrong turn and we ended up getting lost. And my dad, being like probably most of the guys here in the room, didn't want to stop and ask for directions. Now, this was pre-GPS days. This was pre-cell phone Waze app days. This was back in the day when you had the Rand McNally Road Atlas. Well, in Savannah, Georgia, it wasn't actually one of the ones where you could actually see all the streets. So we ended up driving around for what seemed like an hour until we found the Hardee's that was really just right around the corner from where our hotel was at. And why did this happen? The reason's simple, right? My dad didn't want to ask for help. And maybe like my dad, you can relate to not wanting to ask for help for things in your life. Like I think we don't ask for help because it makes us look weak or inferior or that we don't have what it takes. And the reality is that we all need help from time to time, right? And we need to be willing to ask for help with different things in life. Now, some things are easier to ask for help for than others. In fact, as I was preparing this message, I came across a bunch of help wanted ads and signs that I thought, man, these are pretty funny. I got to share these with you this morning. So take a look at this first one. Now hiring, cashier, weekends, must be 21 plus, applications available inside, cannot look anything like Skeletor from He-Man. Like, whoever looks like that, okay? That was the first one. Next one, store closing, now hiring. I don't know who's gonna apply for that job. Next slide. Wanted, workaholic for a special department, all shifts, highly reliable, no vacation or sick leave, must be flexible, intelligent, and friendly. Now, nobody intelligent is taking that job, right? Next one. Our secret ingredient is in our people, now hiring. Now, where did the secret ingredient go? Or what did you do with it, right? The next one, show that one. Surgeon wanted for a new health clinic opening in the area. No experience needed, must have own tools. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to that surgeon anytime soon. And then this final one, it just got me. Wanted somebody to go back in time with me. This is not a joke. You'll get paid after we get back, must bring your own weapons, safety not guaranteed. I've only done this once before. You know, this one really intrigued me because I read that and I thought, okay, I might actually want to do that. Like I told you the week one, like I wanted to be like Marty McFly and travel back in time. Like that would be cool if you could actually do it. But Don't you wish that asking for help were as simple as like posting an ad in the paper or putting a sign up on the outside of a building and people would know? But the reality is this, that doesn't happen, does it? You know, over the last month, we've been in this series called Letters from My Future Self, and we've been looking at the things that we wish we knew then, that we need to know now, and how knowing those things, we can make some changes that can affect our future. And we've said throughout this series, kind of the big idea of this series is this, that the decisions that you make today, they shape your tomorrow. And so we've been discussing how we can do some things now that could affect this positive change in our future. Last week, we talked about how we need to be willing to dream big and not give up on those dreams, that God places these dreams within us and we need to pursue our big dreams, to step out in faith. And then 2 weeks ago, Rob Jones, our worship pastor, he talked about how we need to be willing to forgive in life, that forgiveness, when we willingly give that to others, we find freedom in forgiveness. And then in week 1 of this series, we talked about worry and how we all deal with worry in our lives, and that worry is something that can subtract from our lives, and that we need to give those worries and those cares to God. Well, today, I want to look at something else that I think a lot of us, our future selves, wish that we could go back and tell our former selves, and it has to do with asking for help. Like a lot of us, we try to do things on our own, but what we want to talk about today is how we need to give help, we need to ask for help from others and not try to be a lone ranger and do it all by ourselves. And the reality is, this is so much easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why you maybe come in here today and don't ask for help for the things that are going on in your life. Maybe things are weighing you down right now, but my hope is that today what you would see is that at the end of this message, that you would understand that asking for help is not an admission of failure, but it's an attitude of success. Now, through this series, we've been digging into some stories that we find in Scripture. We've also been reading the words of this guy named Solomon in the book of Proverbs. And I think Proverbs was really a book that Solomon wrote to his kids, but it was also a bunch of stuff that he had learned in his life that he wished that he could go back, his future self, could go back and tell his former self. And in Proverbs chapter 2, verse 3, Solomon says this about asking for help. He says, "Cry out for insight and ask for understanding." I mean, Solomon, who was one of the wisest men, if not the wisest man to have ever lived, he understood our need for asking for help, and we need to understand that as well. In fact, what Solomon says here, I believe, is exactly why we don't oftentimes ask for help. We fear doing it because we don't want to cry out for help, and in the process of crying out for help, people might perceive our cries as there's something wrong with us. And so rather than asking for help, what we do is we try to do it on our own, which is really a dangerous place to be. And we'll see in this story that we want to look at today. Now, if you've got a Bible or a Bible app on your smartphone, you could turn with me to the book of Exodus. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 18 today. And it's in Exodus 18 that we see this encounter between this guy named Moses and his father-in-law, a guy named Jethro. Now, for many of you, you've probably heard of this guy Moses, right? Moses had been tasked by God to lead the Israelite people out of Egyptian slavery and oppression. He's the guy that's to head this up. And so Moses, he gathers all the people together. He leads them out. There's all kinds of different things that happen. And now they're in the wilderness. And that's where things start to go wrong. You see, the people, they begin to think back about what it was like in Egypt, and they begin to think about the gourmet food that they had in Egypt, and they aren't liking what Moses is providing for them, and they start complaining about that. Or they don't like the water, that it's not Perrier, that it's just that Ozark brand, it's not sparkling water. And so they complain about that, and there's all these fights and these quarrels that begin to take place. And then what we see is that Moses, he's the guy who's tasked with fixing all the problems, or at least that's what he's led to believe. And what we see is that Moses is doing this all by himself, and it's not a good thing. And look, the task that is at hand for Moses is too big a task for any of us. Like there's not one person here that could say, you know what, I can lead 1 million people all by myself. Like that would be like me saying that today our government is run by just one person, the president of the United States. He's leading everyone. Think about what that would be like for a minute. Okay, never mind. Don't think about that, okay? We'll just keep moving on. But anyway, we get to Exodus 18, and what we find out is that Moses is running the show by himself. And that's when we see him get this visit from his father-in-law. Now, I like how Moses finds out he's getting the visit from his father-in-law in verse 6. Listen to what it says. It says, Jethro had sent a message to Moses saying, I, Jethro, your father-in-law, am coming to see you with your wife and your 2 sons. Now, when I read that, I thought that was kind of funny because I thought to myself, man, here's Moses, he's leading all these people, and then he gets the memo from his father-in-law, hey, I'm coming to visit you with your wife and your 2 sons. And if I'm Moses, I'm thinking, great, what am I about to get reprimanded for? Like I imagine that's what Moses had to be thinking. Well, Jethro arrives, and we read what happens next in verses 7-9. It says, so Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed low and he kissed him. They asked about each other's welfare, and then he went into Moses' tent. Moses told his father-in-law everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and Egypt on behalf of Israel. He also told them about all the hardships they had experienced along the way and how the Lord had rescued his people from all their troubles. Jethro was delighted when he realized about all the good things that the Lord had done for Israel as he rescued them from the hand of the Egyptians. And so we read here that Moses tells Jethro everything that's taken place. He tells him about all the difficulties that he's experienced along the way. But then he says, look, God's provided for me and he's taken care of everything. And Jethro is pleased with his son-in-law. And for Moses, this is good news, right? Because let's admit, if you have an in-law, if you have in-laws, you want them to approve of what you're doing, don't you? Like you want them to be happy with you. I remember when I asked my in-laws if I could marry my wife, Amanda. I had to go to both of them because they were separated. So I went to my father-in-law first and I said, hey, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. And my father-in-law was like, yes, absolutely. We'd love to add you to the family. I went to Amanda's mom. I took her out for lunch. And at lunch, I said, hey, I would love to marry your daughter. Would that be okay? And she said, no, absolutely not. That is never happening, right? Now, it was one of those moments where she just thought we were too young and we got to the bottom of it. But in that moment, she wasn't really that excited about that. And I thought that I had just failed, that I wasn't pleasing my in-laws. Like we want people to be happy and encouraging to us about the things that we're doing in life. And so I think sometimes the reason we don't go and ask other people for help is we may not get the response that we hope to get, or it may, when we ask for help, it may seem like we're weak or that we don't have it all together or that we're simply failing. And Moses, he's got kind of this moment where he's got to prove to his father-in-law a little bit as well. Look back at the story and notice what happens next. In verses 13-18, it says this. The next day, Moses took his seat to hear the people's disputes against each other. They waited before him from morning till evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he asked, what are you really accomplishing here? Why are you trying to do this all alone while everyone stands around from morning till evening? And Moses replied, because the people come to me to get a ruling from God. And when disputes arise, they come to me, and I'm the one who settles the case between the quarreling parties. I inform the people of God's decrees and give them his instructions. Well, this is not good, Moses' father-in-law explained. You're going to wear yourself out and the people too. This job is too heavy of a burden for you to handle all by yourself. What we read here is that Jethro, he wakes up the next morning, he looks out of his tent, and what does he see? He sees this line of people that is lined up outside of Moses' tent. It's kind of like the line at the DMV here in Texas, right? I remember when we first moved here, I had to get a driver's license. It took me 3.5 hours to get my driver's license. It's insane, right? And what happens when people wait in line that long? They usually get a little bit crazy, don't they? I mean, it's why there's armed police officers at the DMV, because there's people like me who can't sit there that long and be patient. And so you have to have somebody enforce those things. Well, Jethro, he sees this and he's like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like this is not a good idea for you to handle all of this by yourself. Explain to me why you're the only one here that's doing this. And Moses' response is really simple. He says, well, you have to understand, I mean, the people need me. I'm the one who has to make all of the decisions. They depend on me to make these rulings. And maybe you can relate to a guy like Moses. Like maybe you feel like the weight of everything at your job depends on you. Or everything in your family depends on you. Or the ministry that you serve in, it depends on you. And if you're not there, if you're not doing the task, if you're not doing the job, then everything's going to come crashing down. And I think one of the reasons why we don't ask for help is simply this, that we have a hard time just letting go. Because notice what Jethro says to Moses here about this again in verses 17 and 18. He says, look, Moses, this is not good. You're going to wear yourself out and the people too. This job is too heavy a burden for you to handle all by yourself. And look, I think we all need people like Jethro in our lives. People who will say, look, this is not good. What you are doing right now, you are going to burn yourself out. You cannot do this alone. And for some of you here today, my hope is that that is the message that you need to hear today, and that you'll take these words and you'll apply them to your life. That you understand that it is not good to do things alone, and that you simply need, some of you need to ask for help. And look, this is something that I wish that my future self could go back and tell my former self. Especially early on in ministry, there was a time where when I first started out in ministry, I felt like everything that I was doing depended on me. Like if the ministry was going to grow, it was only going to be if I was doing everything, if I was taking on all the responsibilities and I wasn't willing to ask for help. Well, it wasn't until a really good friend of mine came to me one day and gave me these words of wisdom. He said, hey, Nate, I love you so much that I need you to hear this. Do you think that God can't do this without you? That kind of took me back for a minute. He said, God can do this with or without you. God wants you to help in this ministry. He wants you to serve in this ministry, but you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to destroy whatever future you have in ministry because you aren't willing to ask anyone else for help. And in the process, what you're doing right now is you're destroying the relationship with your family. I mean, that took me back. Like, that was a game changer for me. Like, I realized in that moment that I was doing more harm than I was good. That I was robbing my family of the time that they deserved, which meant that because of it, I was spending more time in ministry than with those that I loved the most. And I wasn't really living out my calling, not only to be in ministry, but also to be the best father and husband that I could be. And so I had to learn that sometimes it's okay to let go and ask for help. I think there's another reason, though, that we don't ask for help, and that is this. We don't ask for help because we're afraid that it's going to make us look weak. Like, I'd argue that was a part of Moses' problem. Like, for him, he had everyone coming to him for answers. God had tasked him to lead the people of Israel, and he thought to himself, if I start asking other people for help, then it will make me look weak, and they won't see me as the leader that God has called me to be, that I'm not strong, and they'll see that as a weakness. But notice the wisdom of Jethro here in verses 19 to 23. He says, now listen to me, and let me give you a word of advice, and may God be with you. You should continue to be the people's representative before God, bringing their disputes to him. Teach them God's decrees and give them his instructions. Show them how to conduct their lives, but select from all the people some capable, honest men who fear God and hate bribes. Appoint them as leaders over groups of 1,000, 150, and 10. They should always be available to solve the people's common disputes, but have them bring the major cases to you. Let the leaders decide the smaller matters themselves. They will help you carry the load, making the task easier for you. If you follow this advice, and if God commands you to do so, then you will be able to endure the pressures, and all the people will go home in peace. I mean, Jethro's advice, his wisdom here to Moses is simple. He simply says, look, Moses, you need to stop doing this all by yourself. You need to ask other people for help. You can still be in charge. You can handle all the big matters, but these small things that you're wasting time for, that you have people standing in line taking a number like they're standing at the deli counter, you need to knock that off, and you need to let other people help you. And essentially what Jethro is saying here in this moment is what we said up front. Asking for help is not admitting failure. It's pursuing success. Look, if you want to be successful in whatever it is that you're facing, realize that it's okay to ask for help. If it's overcoming an addiction, ask for help. If it's struggling with something mentally in your life, ask for help. If it's trying to get in better shape physically, ask for help. If it's completing a big job or a task, don't try to do it on your own. Ask for help. Because I would say this, asking for help is not an admission of failure, it is an attitude. It's an attitude of success. Back in 1965, the Beatles, they wrote a hit song that rose to the top of the charts and made it to number one really quickly. It was this song called Help that we heard at the beginning in the bumper video. And that song was written by one of the band members, John Lennon. And the song was written out of John Lennon's plea and his cry for help in his own life. You see, as the Beatles rose to this popularity really quickly, what happened is that Lennon, he started to get depressed and he became overweight. And the lyrics of this song were really his cry out, his plea for help with things in life. And in the course of this song, he wrote these words: "Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me?" And I think the words of that song are fitting words for many of us here today. That we have simply been afraid to cry out for help for far too long. And some of us, we need to say that today: "Lord, won't you please, please help me? Hey, friend, will you please, please help me?" Like some of you today need to ask someone else for help because right now you feel like you're drowning in the difficulties and the struggles of life, but honestly, you've just been too afraid to ask for help because of what people might think of you. They might think that there's something wrong with you or that you don't have what it takes. But asking for help should never make us feel as though we're failing. I hope what you hear today is this: that asking for help, when we ask for help, what we're really saying is this: help me to succeed. And look, if I could be honest with you today as your pastor, there have been many times in my own life where I haven't asked for help in the midst of the things that have been going on in my life. I haven't asked for help because as a pastor and a leader of the church, it's really hard sometimes to ask others for help because you don't want people to think that you're weak, or that you don't have it all together, that you can't lead a campus, or that you can't lead a staff, or that you can't help pastor other people. And so there have been a lot of times in my life where I've lived isolated from everyone else because I didn't want to stop and ask anybody else for help. But what I've had to come to realize is sometimes the best thing that I can do is to ask for help in a situation, with a problem, or with whatever it is I'm struggling with, because when you ask for help, understand you're not facing it alone. A few weeks ago, I was at our Colleyville campus when they launched their first Thursday night kickoff of their Thursday night service. And I was sitting up front to the right in the room there, and right behind me was one of the guys who runs our counseling center for all of our Compass campuses. His name's Matt LaGrange, and he tapped me on the shoulder afterwards and said, "Hey, Nate, did you get the email that got sent out a couple weeks ago?" It was an email for this counseling for pastors called Parissos. It's something that they just started doing. And he said, "Did you get the email?" And I said, "Yeah, I got it." He said, "Well, are you going to sign up for it or not?" And I said, "Well, I want to do it at some point, but right now is not a good time. Like I'm leading this campus and we're getting ready to build a building and I'm dealing with all the stuff that's going on in my family and I just don't have the time." And he said, "Those words exactly are why you need this." He said, you need some help. Because what's going to happen is you're going to become one of the statistics in the next 3 years, and you're just going to burn out because you're trying to do it all by yourself. And so you need to ask for help. So I went home, and as I was driving home, a half hour from Colleyville to my house, a lot of time to think. And it was like God had smacked me over the head with a 2x4 in that moment. And I realized I better ask for some help. And so I just want you to know today, I'm being vulnerable as a pastor, that I decided to sign up for counseling. Not because there's something wrong with me or something's going on in my life right now, but I realized that over the next few years, there's a lot of stuff that's going to keep happening here. This campus is growing. We're expanding. We've got some great things happening. I've got to lead a staff, but I've also got to kind of help guide the direction of this building project. And so in the midst of that all, I could get worn out. And I don't want to be a statistic that isn't around to see what happens when God maybe fulfills that dream that we talked about last week of reaching thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the North Fort Worth area. And so I just want you to know that I'm asking for help because I realize that I can't do it alone. Now the reality is this. Asking for help and needing help has always been a part of God's design for us. Asking for help is not admitting failure, but it's recognizing it's the way that God wired each and every one of us. We can go all the way back to the garden when God creates Adam. Why did God create Adam in the first place? It says he wanted someone to help him. He wanted Adam to be the one to name the animals and just kind of take care of the earth and the land and everything, right? So he created Adam, and then what did he do? He realized that Adam was going to need a helper too. And so he created Eve. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, we read these words. He says, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make what? I'll make a helper who is just right for him." You see, from the very beginning, God designed for us this need to help and give help to each others. Understand that asking for help should never make and have this mindset in our lives that it's something that's shameful or that it's equal to failure. That God built within us from the very beginning this need to ask other people for help, and then he began fulfilling that need immediately. That's what he did all the way back with Adam and Eve. Now, there's another thing that we have to recognize when it comes to asking for help, and that is this. Asking for help is a blessing to others. You know, sometimes I don't think we ask for help. We avoid asking for help because we're like, I'm not putting my stuff on somebody else. I'm not putting my baggage and the weight of all that I'm dealing with on somebody else. I'm just going to try to deal with it on my own. And you see, this thinking also forgets the way that God designed us. It also forgets what God called the church to be. That when God sent Jesus back to this earth, he set up the church, right? And then Jesus ascended into heaven. He said, and then you're going to go out and you're going to be my witness. You're going to help other people. You're going to be there for each other. That's what the church is supposed to be out. And God wants us to help each other out in times of struggle. Galatians 6:2 says this, share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. You see, the reason that Compass North Fort Worth exists, if this is your first time here today, I hope what you hear today is this, is that we want to be there for you. That this isn't a place where you just come and then you never get connected and you never can grow in your walk or that you don't ever get to know anybody. This is a place where you can come, you can share your burdens. You can give those to someone and they're here for you. That's why we exist, because we want to be a church where people who maybe don't even like church would like to attend because they know that they can come in here and feel love and acceptance and never feel outcast or unwanted. And the reason that the church exists is because God gave each of us different gifts and abilities, and we're called to use those gifts and abilities to help each other out. That's one thing that I love about our campus. This wasn't in my manuscript today, but I think maybe God wants me to share this morning. I walked in this morning right before 7 o'clock. They had homecoming here last night. Just imagine what this space looked like when we walked in this morning. It was not pretty. But our volunteers came in. Not one of them, I didn't hear anybody complain. They just served, they just got it ready, and this space, you wouldn't even be able to tell that homecoming happened here last night because that's what we do as the church. We just love and we serve and we don't complain about it. We do it because we want to make sure that you have the best possible experience. My daughter McKenna this morning, again, something else that happened today. My wife and my daughter are getting ready, and my wife says to me after she gets here, she goes, hey, McKenna said, I wouldn't want to go to any other church. And Amanda said, why? She said, well, all those other churches, you don't have to come in and do anything. You just walk in the doors and everything's set up. Well, we get to come early and we get to set up and serve in that way. And you see, that's what it's about. That's why this church exists, is because we're here to serve other people. And that's why we have these little kids that they will not watch TCU get beat by Ohio State because they want to come and serve early in the morning. Literally, that was another story I heard. That's what happens. A few months ago, we saw this love, this service in action through the generosity of many of the families here. Our student pastor, Marcus, and his family, they were in need of another vehicle. And our church rallied around them in an amazing way. We had kids who were doing lemonade stands. We had kids painting rooms and washing cars to raise money. We had people who were gifted mechanically fixing up this van that they ultimately ended up receiving so that it was in the best shape possible. We even had people sacrificially giving so that we could give them this car. Why do we do that? Because that's what we're called to do as his followers. You see, God designed us to work together and help each other out, not to function as isolated individuals. Understand that by asking for help, we are honoring God's purpose for our lives and in gifting us differently and honoring each other by asking each other to use those gifts for his kingdom. And this is what Jethro was encouraging Moses to do. Find others who are gifted to help you out. And notice what happens when Moses actually takes his father-in-law's advice. Exodus 18, verses 24 to 26 says this: Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice. He followed the suggestions. He chose capable men from all over Israel, and he appointed them as leaders over the people. He put them in charge of groups of 1,000, 150, and 10. These men were always available to solve the people's common disputes. They brought the major cases to Moses, but they took care of the smaller matters themselves. And what we read here is that Moses, he goes out, he asks other people for help. And he begins to put other people in position so that they can solve the small things and he can take just the big matters. And he took some of the weight off of himself. Now, can I encourage you today? If you're here this morning and you feel like you're on an island all alone, if you are feeling isolated, like there's no one else to help you out, understand that the church is here for you. And that you can find others here who can help you out. That's what we want to be for you. You know, some of the best ministries that we have here at Compass are specifically designed around this idea of getting you connected. Now, some of you, about 60 of you, are experiencing that right now as you just started Rooted last week. And Rooted is a great opportunity to get plugged into community here at Compass. One of the other things that we offer are community groups. It's just another opportunity because we believe what happens here on Sundays is good, but circles are better than rows. We need each other. We can't do life alone. And another way that you can get plugged in, probably the easiest way where you don't have to actually share your whole life story or anything that's going on in your life unless you want to, is just starting to serve. Because as you start to serve, what you'll find out is that you'll avoid isolation. And there'll be others as you begin to have conversations who will be there to help you out when you need it the most. Now, here's the thing. Everything that we've looked at so far has revolved around the idea of asking others for help in life, but I think we need to take that one step further. Not only do we need to ask others for help, but we also need to be willing to ask God for help. Now, I skipped over this earlier. I want to go back to verse 23. Notice right after Moses has asked for help, and he's listened to Jethro's advice, he says this: if you follow this advice, these are Jethro's words of wisdom. If you follow this advice, if God commands you to do so, then you'll be able to endure the pressures and all these people will go home in peace. I think it's pretty fitting what Jethro says here. He says, look, my advice to you is this: you need to ask others for help, but you also need to realize that you can bring your request before God because he cares about you. You need to give those things over to God because he'll help you endure all this. And here's the thing I think that Jethro was helping Moses to understand. It's what I hope that you hear today. Asking for help acknowledges the truth of our need and God's grace. I mean, can I be real with you today? Sometimes I think the reason we don't ask for help is because when we're failing and we're weak and we're going through the difficulties in life, we're like, I don't want to put that on somebody else. But we can always put it on God. Because God never looks down on us for admitting our past failures, admitting where we need help in life. He says, bring that stuff to me because I care about you. In fact, God invites you to bring your needs to him. And look, I think sometimes we argue and we tell ourselves, look, God doesn't have time for what I'm going through. It's just too small. It's not really that big of a deal. But can I just say this? It's so far from the truth. God wants you to go to him. He wants you to bring your request to him. He wants you to ask for help. Listen to these words from 1 Peter 5:7 that prove that. It says, give all your worries and your cares to God, for what? He cares about you. Do you understand what God's saying here? He says, the worries that you can't seem to overcome in life, ask me for help. The addiction that you can't seem to break, ask me for help. The marriage that is about to fall apart, ask me for help. For the child that you're struggling to connect with, God says, ask me for help. Bring all of your cares, bring all of your worries to me because I care about you. And so here's what we want to do as we close out today. I believe in this room there are many of us who have been afraid to ask for help for far too long. And so we just want to lift those requests to God. And so we're going to sing this song. And as we sing this song, myself and some of our team are going to be around the room and also in our prayer area here. And if you have anything that you need specific prayer for, if you need to go to God and ask him for help, we would love to pray with you. But also as we sing this song, you can just lift those requests up to God right where you're at. He hears you. He just says, bring those cares to me because I care about you. And maybe you're here today and you're ready to take another step in your relationship with Christ. We want to offer that time for you as well. And so you can just head to our decision area over here to my right. And someone from our team will be there. They'd love to talk to you about what it looks like to follow Jesus, what it looks like to make that decision to be baptized. So right now, here's what we want you to do. Just go ahead and stand with us as we sing this song. And if you need prayer for anything that's going on in your life, if you need to ask for help, bring those requests to God right now as we pray, as we sing this song.